Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I will be talking about Keith Lee and his Atlanta restaurant experiences, Atlanta restaurant and business culture, as well as Black businesses. So Keith Lee was in Atlanta, and when I tell you, it has been a whole mess. So Keith Lee, who is a food reviewer and food critic on TikTok, who goes to different cities, trying different foods from different restaurants, as of recently, he touched down in Atlanta, and let's just say that his experience with most of the restaurants was less than pleasant. Now, Keith Lee has, at the time of this video, has about 14.6 million loyal followers on TikTok. So he went to a few restaurants in Atlanta, one being the Real Milk and Honey, and the Old Lady Gang, owned by Escape member and Real Housewives of Atlanta star Kandi Burruss. When he went to make his review about these restaurants, he said, "As you can see, I don't have any bags in my hands." Then proceeds to explain how and why he did not receive his food. He talks about how he tried to call in his order to the Real Milk and Honey, but they said they do not take call-in orders, and so he calls through DoorDash. Now on DoorDash, they said it was closed, but online they said they were open until 5 p.m., but they tried to order at 4 p.m. Then they said they were closed for deep cleaning. This is where Keith came and realized the ridiculous house rules that came with these Atlanta restaurants. He arrived at the Old Lady Gang and was met with the same ridiculous rules for call-in orders as the Real Milk and Honey. His family was also told that they would have to wait an hour to an hour and a half to receive their orders. However, once Keith Lee showed up, and they recognized him, they automatically tried to accommodate him, but not his family. Now, Keith does acknowledge that he is an influencer, and he does acknowledge that he has a big following, but he has made it clear that he does not want special treatment and that he wants to be treated like a normal, regular human being like everybody else. So he refused to dine at this establishment. Another restaurant named Toast on Lenox had people waiting for over 2 hours to be seated, but when they saw Keith Lee, they immediately opened the doors for him, so he again refused to eat at that establishment. Keith is also very trusted and supported due to his honest reviews of the food and experience that he has when he goes to these restaurants. So when he gives his very polite review, good or not so good, about these people and these restaurants, people will follow suit. The fallout from the Keith Lee / Atlanta saga has even unintentionally affected other restaurants such as Milk and Honey, which was confused with the Real Milk and Honey, and they were receiving hate comments and unalive threats. Now, not all reviews of his experiences in Atlanta were negative. There were restaurants such as Juicy Jerk, the dining experience, and the bodega that he reviewed, and he complimented the food and the customer service. His good review of these restaurants have been able to work to these restaurants' benefit because the owner of Juicy Jerk posted how she now has an influx of new customers. This goes to show how a good review, good product, and service can go a long way. And people have taken notice about what they call the Keith Lee effect. You get a good review from Keith Lee, and it can definitely help your business. Whether it's a Keith Lee or any other big, medium, small content creator or food critic or the average human being that reviews your food, it's great to definitely leave people with positive experiences and good reason to come back. I'm telling you. The responses from these establishments in regards to Keith Lee's reviews of them varied from okay to absolutely terrible. The Real Milk and Honey responded in such a trash way, trying to be petty by doing a TikTok skit saying they did not know who Keith Lee was, even though they invited him. One woman who was a manager at the restaurant left a comment saying something along the lines of, "You let an autistic man tell you what and where to eat?" They eventually deleted the video and turned off their comments on both social media pages after getting dragged. Now, Kandi Burruss, although she skimmed over the real issue at hand, she was way more polite in her response to Keith Lee. Now, all of this drama has caused Atlanta residents to give their takes on their experiences with particularly Black-owned Atlanta restaurants and other Black businesses in Atlanta. People have pointed out how the Keith Lee situation was just a microcosm of an issue that has been going on for years, and his reviews just exposed it. Lovely T, who I am a subscriber to and who I do like, whose opinions and commentaries I do like most of the time. Lovely T even did a video and a live call-in show about this situation, and she touched on her experience of being in Atlanta and how, because she is an influencer who has a pretty big following, or a pretty sizable following with people that do rock with her, she gets certain preferential treatment when it comes to being seated in restaurants in Atlanta. However, she herself, like Keith Lee, has had experiences where these Atlanta restaurants will upcharge you or try to find different ways to sell you something. Keith Lee even talked about how he was charged $1 for butter. Lovely T has talked about how she, I think, went to a club or went to a lounge or a restaurant and they were trying to sell her hookah, and she said she doesn't smoke like that, but they were really trying to push something to upsell her. I have heard of people getting charged $1 for condiments like butter at the Real Milk and Honey, being charged for parking but waiting hours for a table. I heard valet is costly. I heard people are being constantly bombarded to buy some things. And I've even heard that places are mixing aesthetics, because I've heard about hookahs being at chiropractors' offices, which is so absurd to me. And I get it. Different places, different cities, different states have their different cultures. I'm from New York City, and I will tell you, there is somewhat a level of, expensive or upscale places. I will admit that. But I'm not too sure about people charging $1 for butter. I understand some of these restaurants, let's say McDonald's or Burger King. Some places here in New York City, some McDonald's or some Burger Kings will charge you 16 to 25 cents for an extra condiment. And then you have others that will just give you like how many condiments you want for free. But I don't know about a whole dollar for butter. Unless they're giving you a small tub, it doesn't make sense. People have brought up how the bougie, the celebrity, and the favoritism culture down in Atlanta is the reason for what's ruining their businesses, particularly Black-owned businesses. People have complained about Atlanta wanting the aesthetic of luxury, bougie, high class, and the grass wall with neon lights and the DJs, but will not apply the same standard when it comes to the food or the customer service while charging the high prices for it. A lot of people have criticized from Atlanta and even Houston and even DC Black-owned restaurants, particularly it seems down south Black-owned restaurants that perpetuate the bougie aesthetic or the upscale luxury aesthetic in their restaurants. And people have criticized the grass wall and the neon lights and the DJs and the aesthetic of the restaurants, and have criticized the food. And it seems like Atlanta is not the only one. I've heard of people criticizing Houston for doing this, and DC. And don't get me wrong, I like a luxury aesthetic. As I said, I live in New York City, and a metropolitan city having upscale looking and upscale quality, should have upscale quality along with upscale looking decor and atmosphere and the aesthetic. I'm here for that. Now, Lovely T even said in her call-in show that there is too much of a conflation between hip-hop/rap and trap culture in Atlanta businesses. She described how some of the waitresses would dress in scantily clad outfits that resemble what you may see at the strip club or Hooters. There is too much club culture involved, even down to the music played in these establishments. Like, why are we playing trap music at a so-called luxury, bougie brunch place? Save that for the club. I have seen people bring up these places of business being so fame and status and celebrity obsessed that they will give special treatment to the person with a big following or a local celebrity or a rapper. So for instance, one of the Real Milk and Honey's rules was, unless you're Obama, no reservations. And although these rules come off as jokes, quote unquote, there definitely seems to be a seriousness in it, because I always feel like when it comes to us as Black people, a joke really isn't 100% a joke. It's something to be funny, but at the same time there's a level of seriousness to it. Seriously, those rules felt like I was being reprimanded. As Lovely T said, it seemed like these Black-owned establishments in Atlanta, not all of course, want us to pay for their lifestyles and to keep up with appearances of having high status than to provide the quality to back it up. Now, side note, like I said, I live in New York City. We are a melting pot of different ethnic and class and income backgrounds. So you will find a good amount of upscale and bougie aesthetic restaurants. So it's kind of used to it here. But then again, you will also find, I don't want to say hole in the wall, but you will find something that is not necessarily, luxury, bougie, aesthetically pleasing, atmospheric restaurants, but they can still serve you good food. And we do have some restaurants that are rated below a 3, no biggie, but you will find a plethora of restaurants in New York City that will at least have a 4-star rating, whether it's because of the food or mainly because of the service. At the end of the day, I think it's more so easy to have a good time. I have been to Atlanta before, but I have not been to Atlanta so extensively to understand that this is what's going on in Atlanta restaurant culture. Now, in regards to the luxury, bougie, aesthetically pleasing places and restaurants, I am not fully against Black people being a part of the luxury or bougie crowd, whether we are the owners of these businesses that provide these products or services, or we are the patrons of these businesses that live these lifestyles and patronize these businesses. Other communities get to be represented in that space or aesthetic or having that lifestyle, so why can't we? The problem lies when you don't provide the quality or you overly conflate two contrasting aesthetics and cultures. Some Black businesses have even been called out for the way they negatively treat their Black customers versus other races and ethnicities. I think part of why we have allowed this to fester into the problem we are calling out now more than ever is because we have been complacent with it, and we also have been guilt-tripped and gaslit with the old saying of support/buy from Black businesses because we don't get capital like that, or we need to keep the money in our community, or other communities insert what they do or don't do here, etc. Yes, supporting Black businesses is important, but I also feel like what has started out as a quote to mean something positive, to shift the Black community's mindset for the betterment of the community, has now turned into a guilt trip tactic. Because there are certain Black people in our community that are too capitalistic or too elitist, no matter what their income brackets or their income level is, especially when the owners do not want to take any criticism. Now, another side note, in addition to this, the Black consumer or the Black customer when it comes to Black businesses is not fully innocent either. There have been times where some of the worst clientele that Black business owners have experienced or come in contact with were other Black people. So for instance, if you remember the situation that took place, I think a year or two ago with Dallas True Kitchen and Cocktails, where that Black male, I think he was a lawyer and he owned that restaurant in Dallas, and he said, hey, he opened this restaurant to have an upscale place for Black people, and he said mainly his clientele is Black women, to come in and feel like they are part of the I guess high-end bougie crowd where Black people can come together and commemorate and have, a high-end place to wine and dine and have fun. And on that level, I agree with it. But it was not all. But there were his Black clientele, his Black customers getting on top of his furniture and twerking to a song playing in his restaurant. And first of all, that goes to show, Chrissy also talked about this, where she said it goes both ways, where the Black owner felt the need to yell at his Black patrons, at his black restaurant goers and his black customers, because it's easy to talk down to black people by other black people. But it also felt the sorry. But on the other hand, his black customers felt like it was okay to disrespect his place of business by twerking on his furniture. And this also goes back to the conflating of two different cultures and aesthetics, because if you claim for this to be a classy, luxury, bougie place, why are you playing ratchet music that they are twerking to? Granted, it shouldn't matter what type of music that is being played, and they shouldn't be twerking just because that music is being played. But if you want a certain aesthetic, instead of playing trap music or drill music or twerking music in your place, like playing Body Yaddy Yaddy by or Thought-ish by Megan Thee Stallion, who, I like Megan Thee Stallion, but at the same time, if you're trying to have a certain aesthetic and a certain place, why aren't you playing smooth jams or slow jams and R&B that's clean? And why aren't you playing like neo soul or jazz music by black artists? Why aren't you playing Ella Fitzgerald? Why aren't you playing 50s and 60s black artists? If you want to keep it all black, everything, and keep it classy, why aren't you letting the aesthetic match? And it also goes to show that we've kind of let too much of the club hip hop, and I'm talking about ratchet hip hop, gangster rap hip hop. We've let too much of the negative aspects and the overly done aspects of hip hop take over the culture. So much to the point that even criticizing it gets you criticized. But I digress. Then you may wonder why they separate from or are tougher on their black customers or want to move out of predominantly black neighborhoods. So at the end of the day, black consumers and black business owners need to get it together. So yes, that's all I wanted to say. Tell me what you think about in the comments section. Do you agree with Keith Lee? What's your take on Keith Lee, Atlanta restaurants and business culture, as well as black businesses in general? And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.